1. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, a specter haunts this new world of side proposition, and that specter is the illusion of a single monolith. We on side opposition believe that there is no single arc or definition of justice because justice means different things to different people given diverse ethnic, religious, and cultural nuances. In status quo, we have African courts that prosecute authoritarian regimes differently than that of the West because in their side of the world, because of things like apartheid and genocide, democracy is not necessarily seen as the end-all, be-all of justice and of things concerning that nature. Similarly, Sharia law or Islamic law also have a very different way to arbitrate matters of finance and the family because to these particular individuals, things like polygamy and things like investing are seen as particularly the norm as opposed to what we would traditionally have in the West or traditionally would have in a particular democracy. On side proposition, the ICC creates a definition of justice likely dictated by consensus and by majority, and it is blind to the complexities and diverse reality of the world. This is a prefers motion, but we also still have to understand that people come from very different backgrounds of religion, culture, race, and ethnicity that ultimately make it impossible to be able to arbitrate a singular standard of justice. But even if they were able to do that, and it's true, in principle, it robs them and these individual countries which we posit exist the autonomy, the agency, and the sovereignty to be able to take matters into their own hands. And we think that local or domestic courts on side proposition at worst cease to exist because now why would they need it if they have the ICC or this world police, or at best remain there but continue to be tokenistic and become subservient to that of the ICC. A couple of features to op model. I'll take you in a bit. Number 1, our counterfactual and alternative is status quo. We co-opt a lot of their benefits and tell you that the ICC will still be there, but it coexists with domestic courts and the degree of involvement is case to case. If it is warranted, if it is wanted, and if it is necessary, then they're going to be able to intervene. But if the local courts don't find it warranted, do not want it, and have the agency to be able to do it upon themselves, they're going to stay away. The harm on side government is that all instances, they're going to have ultimate authority and capacity to be able to intervene when they play judge, jury, and executioner. We agree with side government, and at best, they prove a sense of urgency that we want justice. But we think the point in which you have a singular point of failure is the point in which it places too much risk. And the case at best we get from the previous speaker is outcome dependent on them doing it right. But in instances where they do it right, it unlocks the harm I talked to you about an infringement of sovereignty and agency. More on that later in my argument. But before that, POI, go ahead.
Wasn't it also clear earlier that we already said that we would still be acknowledging national law, so therefore it doesn't just make cease to exist for local courts?
You cannot have your cake and eat it too because of what I told you in my pre-oration. You have things like Sharia law, which look at polygamy quite differently than that of a court in the Philippines or in the United States. You also have African courts, of which have very specific nuances to dealing with dictators and authoritarian regimes, precisely because in some parts of Africa, a lot of this is historically and politically necessary and needed in order to be able to have a strongman figure. That is to say, on your side, where this is largely created by majority, and majority of people think that dictators are all bad, that is the point in which they're likely to be able to crack down even on efficient dictators and autocracies. Because on your side, what you're proving is that, we want to be able to deal with war crimes, we want to be able to deal with genocide. We think we can still do that in status quo, but the ICC shouldn't have automatic and complete authoritarian capacity. What is my argument? Responses to the previous speaker will be integrated. I am going to talk to you about the harms of absolute authority and capacity and why status quo is better, allowing us to be able to solve the problem the previous speaker gave and solve that in a better way. First layer of analysis. At best, what we have inside government is an illusion of expediency and efficiency, meaning they pump but they don't necessarily prove how it's going to be better. But the simple question I have then is, when you have hundreds of countries having to vote and arbitrate on a particular case, that's likely going to take super long. And we tell you coming from our side that justice delayed is justice denied, and that oftentimes in order to make that fast is the point in which you have to likely rush into a particular decision and not be able to be as thorough. Meaning, the harm you unlock on their side is spamming this court wherein they're able to put anyone who becomes against the majority or goes against this likely Western standard of how generally the world would think is exactly the point in which they miss the nuance. Secondly, it's just not proximate to the reality of that situation in the domestic and local arena. Meaning, the ICC is judicial, but they don't have executive and legislative capacity to be able to make laws and to be able to arbitrate laws. At best, on-side government, you criminalize them, but the question I have is, what happens afterward? They're likely not going to get the necessary change you need to be able to have in order to deal with the structural reform. You're better able to get that on our side, wherein the very people who are experiencing those harms are also the people voting or electing these particular people into power who craft laws and arbitrate laws. It's not like we can expect the ICC to come in all instances to fix our local problems for them. What have we proven to you from my speech? We've proven to you that it casts a shadow of doubt in terms of their capacity, but even if they're able, it leads to a lot of host of harms that I talked about. We are very proud to stand inside opposition.